poor girl gave her food to a beggar, had no idea he was a black billionaire in disguise. The early morning city air was thick with the damp smell of recent rain, the kind that leaves streets slick and the sidewalks shimmering under the weak dawn light. Amid the rush of workers hurrying to their jobs and the occasional honk of cars navigating the slow crawl of traffic, a small corner near the rundown part of town bore silent witness to a story that was about to unfold in the most unexpected way. Maya Turner was no stranger to struggle. At just 22, she was already carrying the weight of responsibility heavier than most her age. With her mother's frail health and her younger brother still in high school, Maya juggled 2 part-time jobs while pursuing night classes at the community college. But this morning, as she clutched a small paper bag filled with her own humble breakfast, her heart was far heavier than the weight of that food. She settled herself on a cracked bench by the street corner, her hands trembling slightly, not from the morning chill, but from exhaustion and worry. Her worn sneakers were stained with dirt from walking miles to make her shifts, and her clothes, though clean, bore the unmistakable marks of hard days spent on her feet. Across the street, a man sat slumped against a graffiti-tagged wall. His clothes were ragged, a threadbare jacket barely shielding him from the cold, and his face carried the kind of weariness that told stories no one asked about. Maya noticed him every day during her commute, but had never spoken a word until this morning. She watched as he shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around for something to catch his attention, or perhaps just hoping to be invisible. His skin was dark, his features sharp and dignified in spite of the grime, and there was an aura about him that didn't quite fit with the harshness of his surroundings. Her hunger gnawed at her, but more than that, a strange impulse urged her forward. She opened her paper bag and took out a small sandwich, carefully wrapped in wax paper. With a tentative smile, she crossed the street and approached him. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "You look like you haven't eaten." He looked up slowly, eyes meeting hers with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, perhaps recognition, though he quickly masked it with a polite nod. I don't have much," Maya continued, holding out the sandwich. "But I want you to have this. Please." He hesitated for just a moment, then reached out and took the sandwich with trembling hands. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and smooth, with an accent that hinted at somewhere far beyond this city's worn streets. "Thank you, miss," he said quietly. "Your kindness means more than you know." Maya shrugged, cheeks flushed. "It's nothing. We all have tough days." They sat side by side in silence, sharing the small moment beneath the grey sky. Maya's mind raced with questions, but she held back, sensing this man was guarded, carrying invisible burdens. As the morning rush surged around them, a tall, well-dressed man appeared on the scene, his expensive suit and confident stride starkly contrasting with the tired figure on the bench. He approached the homeless man with a subtle authority, his gaze sharp and calculating. Maya instinctively stepped back, watching the interaction unfold. The man reached out, handed the homeless figure a sleek business card, and spoke in a tone both commanding and strangely respectful. "I'm Marcus Caldwell," he said. "You have a meeting at the company headquarters in an hour." The homeless man looked at the card, then back at Marcus, eyes narrowing for a moment before a small smile broke through the exhaustion. Maya's heart pounded. Who was this man? And what kind of life could someone be hiding beneath those tattered clothes? Later that day, at a gleaming skyscraper in the heart of the financial district, the homeless man transformed into a figure commanding attention, not through wealth flaunted, but through the quiet strength that came with power earned. His name was Elijah Reed, a billionaire investor known for turning failing companies into empires, yet here he was, living in disguise, searching for something money couldn't buy. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her modest apartment, her thoughts lingering on the morning's encounter. She didn't know it then, but her simple act of kindness would unravel secrets that had long been hidden beneath the polished surfaces of wealth and influence. That night, as rain pattered softly against her window, Maya whispered to the dark, "Maybe kindness is the bravest thing we have." Unbeknownst to her, Elijah was about to change not only his life, but hers, and challenge a system built on prejudice, power, and deception. The following days after that unexpected encounter unfolded like a silent storm for Maya. She tried to push Elijah's presence in her mind to the back of her thoughts, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the tired yet gentle face of the man she had fed on that rainy morning. His quiet dignity amidst despair was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. And though she knew nothing about him beyond the surface, something deep inside her whispered that their meeting was no coincidence. Elijah Reed was back on the streets, but his mind was miles away from the cold concrete bench he sat on. Behind the facade of a beggar, he was running complex calculations, both financial and personal. For years, he had built his empire from the ground up, amassing billions through keen investments and a vision that outpaced most in the business world. Yet none of his success had prepared him for the emptiness he felt inside, or the question that haunted him daily. Could anyone love him for who he truly was, not for his fortune or his name? Living in disguise wasn't easy. The clothes were uncomfortable, the hunger relentless, and the stares, at times, harsh and unforgiving. But it was a test he willingly imposed on himself. To walk among those who struggled and to experience their world firsthand. That was the only way he believed he could truly understand what mattered beyond wealth. That morning, as Maya headed to her job at the local diner, she noticed Elijah again, this time sitting closer to the busy intersection, his frame hunched, but his eyes scanning the passing faces with an almost surgical precision. She hesitated for a moment before walking over. "How are you today?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up, surprised to see her again so soon. "Better now that you're here," he replied softly. Maya smiled, but her heart ached as she noticed how worn he looked. "I brought you some breakfast," she said, pulling a small paper bag from her coat pocket. "I know it's not much, but it's something." Elijah's eyes glistened with gratitude, though he quickly masked it with a calm nod. "Thank you, Maya. Truly." The two sat quietly on the curb, sharing the simple meal as the city buzzed around them. The contrast was stark. People rushing past with their busy lives, some with disdainful glances, others with hurried indifference. Maya felt the weight of invisibility that Elijah carried like a cloak, a reality she was all too familiar with. Their conversation was brief but meaningful, with Maya cautiously probing into his past, and Elijah deflecting most questions with gentle humor. "I've seen better days," he said, eyes twinkling despite the circumstances. "But maybe these are the days I'm supposed to learn from." It was in that moment Maya realized there was something different about this man, a spark that no hardship could extinguish. Meanwhile, across town, the corporate offices of Reed Enterprises were alive with tension. Unbeknownst to Maya, Elijah's absence had not gone unnoticed. His personal assistant, Claire Morgan, was growing increasingly worried. Elijah was a private man, but even she found the sudden silence unsettling. She paced the sleek office, glancing at the clock and then at her phone. She had tried calling him multiple times, only to be met with silence or his voicemail. Finally, she sent a brief message. "Please call me when you can." "We're worried about you." Elijah had left very specific instructions before disappearing into the streets. No one was to know where he was, and his identity was to remain a secret, even to the closest staff. This was his experiment, his search for truth beyond the boardroom. That afternoon, Maya returned home exhausted, but found a message waiting on her phone. It was from an unknown number. "Thank you for your kindness today. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." E. Her heart skipped a beat. Who was this mysterious Elijah, and why did his message feel like a lifeline? As days passed, the bond between Maya and Elijah deepened, not through grand gestures or declarations, but in the small moments shared between two souls, seeking connection in a world that often overlooked them. However, not everyone was pleased by Elijah's disappearance. At Reed Enterprises, a shadow loomed. Thomas Grant, the company's ambitious CFO, saw Elijah's absence as an opportunity, a chance to seize control and steer the empire in a new direction. In a high-rise conference room overlooking the city, Thomas met with a group of board members. His tone was sharp, his intentions clear. "Elijah's absence is destabilizing," he said. "We need to act decisively. Without his leadership, the company is vulnerable." One board member, skeptical, asked, "Are you suggesting we declare him incapacitated? That's a serious move." Thomas smiled coldly. "If it's what it takes to protect our interests, we cannot let the company fall into chaos because of his personal crisis." Back on the streets, Elijah sensed the tightening noose. His time in disguise was nearing its end, but the lessons he had learned were just beginning to reshape him. He wasn't just a billionaire playing at poverty. He was a man determined to dismantle the walls that divided society, starting with those built within himself. Maya, too, found courage in their growing friendship. For the first time, she dared to dream of a future beyond the struggles that had defined her life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elijah turned to Maya and said, "Thank you for seeing me. Not the beggar, not the billionaire, just me." Maya smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "I've always believed people are more than what they appear. You're proof of that." Their journey was only beginning, a path that would challenge their beliefs, test their resilience, and reveal a truth far greater than either had imagined. And somewhere in the shadows, Thomas Grant was preparing his next move, unaware that the quiet man he sought to control was about to change the rules of the game forever. The days blurred into one another, as Maya and Elijah settled into an unspoken rhythm of survival and companionship. The small room she had secured for him was sparse, a stark contrast to the lavish lifestyle he once knew. But here, surrounded by the raw reality of everyday struggle, Elijah began to feel a connection he had never experienced before. Maya watched him carefully, noticing how he moved with a quiet grace despite the rough edges life had imposed. One afternoon, as they sat on the stoop outside the rundown building, she asked, "Why do you keep yourself hidden like this? Why pretend to be someone you're not?" Elijah looked at her, eyes reflecting a depth of pain and purpose. "Because, Maya, I needed to understand the world beyond the glass walls and gilded towers. I needed to see who would care for me if all my money and titles disappeared." Maya nodded slowly, her heart aching for the man who wore his vulnerability like armor. "And what have you learned so far?" "That kindness still exists," he replied, his voice steady but soft. "That there are people like you who see beyond appearances, but also that the system is cruel, designed to keep people apart, to judge by what's visible instead of what's real." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Maya's mother appeared, face pale and worried. "Maya, your stepmother is asking for you," she whispered urgently. "She knows something." "We have to be careful." Maya's breath hitched. The fragile sanctuary they had built was already under threat. She glanced at Elijah, whose gaze held a quiet determination. "Whatever happens," he said, "we face it together." Meanwhile, in the heart of the city, Thomas Grant was orchestrating his plan. His voice was icy as he addressed the boardroom. "Elijah's disappearance is a risk we can't ignore. If he continues to vanish, It could destabilize the company and shake investor confidence. A board member interjected. But what if it's more than just a disappearance? What if he's purposely undermining us? Thomas's eyes narrowed. Then we have to be ready to act. I've arranged for an investigation into his recent activities. We need to uncover if there's any sabotage. Back in their small refuge, Maya's stepsister Martha was quietly stirring trouble. Resentful and jealous, she had begun to watch Maya's movements closely, her mind weaving schemes fueled by spite and greed. One evening, Martha confronted Maya in the dimly lit kitchen. Who is he, really? That beggar you're hiding. Do you think anyone here believes your stories? Maya stood firm, refusing to be intimidated. He's more than you could ever understand, Martha sneered. I'll make sure everyone knows what you're up to. This secret won't stay hidden for long. Fear settled in Maya's chest, but Elijah's words echoed in her mind. Strength was not the absence of fear, but the courage to face it. The tension escalated when Joy's mother received a veiled warning from Madame Stella, the cunning second wife who wielded influence like a weapon. You'd be wise to reconsider this foolish charity, she hissed during a chance encounter. Some doors, once opened, invite more trouble than you can handle. But Joy's mother was resolute. Kindness is never foolish. We will protect what's right. Late one night, as rain battered the thin walls of their home, Maya found herself alone with Elijah, the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Do you think they'll find out who you really are? She whispered. Elijah met her gaze, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Let them try. The truth has a way of revealing itself, but until then, we have a choice, to live honestly or to live in fear. Their bond grew, fueled by shared hardship and quiet hope, yet the walls around them were closing in fast. The next morning, Maya received a message on her phone, an anonymous tip warning her to stay away from Elijah. Her hands trembled as she showed the text to him. This is just the beginning, he said grimly. They're afraid, and that means we're onto something. Determined not to be silenced, Maya and Elijah began to plan their next steps. They would expose the truth, not just about Elijah's identity, but about the corrupt forces determined to keep him hidden. Their journey was dangerous, the stakes higher than either had imagined. But in each other, they found strength, a reason to fight for a future where love was not measured by wealth or status, but by the courage to stand for what was right. And so, beneath the city's towering skyline, two unlikely allies prepared to challenge a world built on secrets and lies, ready to turn the tables in a story that was far from over. The tension in Maya's small home was palpable as days passed, each moment fraught with the danger of discovery. Elijah, now more aware of the risks he carried, kept to the shadows during the day, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary attention. But his mind was restless, racing with plans and possibilities. He knew that staying hidden forever was not an option. The time would come to reveal himself, to confront the forces working against him. One afternoon, as Maya returned from the market with a basket of fresh vegetables, she found Elijah sitting quietly by the window, his gaze distant. She approached softly. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. "About how this isn't just about me. It's about all the people who have been ignored, pushed aside, judged without a chance. I came here to find love, yes, but I can't forget why I'm here. There's a system that needs to change." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with admiration. "You're not alone, I believe in you, but we have to be careful. Your stepsister Martha and Madame Stella, they're watching. They won't stop until they've torn us apart." That evening, the house grew quieter than usual. Joy's mother whispered to Maya, "We need to find a way to protect him. Not just from the outside, but from those within." Elijah's phone buzzed, a coded message from an unknown sender. "They're coming. Be ready." His eyes darkened with resolve. "It's time to act." Meanwhile, across town, Thomas Grant and his team had intensified their efforts. The private investigator they hired reported back with alarming details. Elijah was seen in places he shouldn't be, interacting with people beneath his usual social sphere, inciting questions and suspicion among the elite. Thomas slammed his fist on the conference table. "Find out everything about this Maya girl. If she's involved, we expose her too. No loose ends." Back at the house, Elijah and Maya sat at the worn kitchen table, poring over papers and news articles. They were preparing to make their story public, to show the world the truth about inequality, prejudice, and the power structures designed to keep people like Elijah in the shadows. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Maya's heart raced. Who could that be at this hour? Elijah motioned for silence, rising slowly. He peered through the peephole and froze. Standing outside was Martha, a cruel smirk on her face, flanked by two burly men. Maya grabbed Elijah's arm, whispering urgently, "They've come for you." Elijah straightened, calm and unyielding. "Then let's not keep them waiting." The door swung open, and the confrontation exploded into chaos. Martha accused Elijah loudly, her voice dripping with venom. "You're a fraud!" "A liar! You've been using us all!" Elijah held up his hands, voice steady. "I'm no fraud. The only lie here is the world that judges without seeing." The men advanced, but Maya stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "Enough. You don't get to decide our fate." A tense standoff followed, but before violence could erupt, a sudden shout came from the street. Neighbors and onlookers gathered, drawn by the commotion. Phones came out, cameras clicked. The tide was turning. One of the burly men looked around nervously. "We should go," Martha hissed. "This isn't over." As they retreated, Maya turned to Elijah. "This fight is bigger than us now." Elijah nodded, the fire in his eyes burning brighter. "And we will win." That night, as the city slept, a quiet revolution was brewing. The poor girl who gave her food to a beggar was now standing beside a man ready to change the world, not through money or power, but through truth and courage. The battle lines had been drawn, and this time, no one would turn away. The next morning broke with an uneasy calm, but beneath the surface, the storm was gathering strength. Elijah woke early, the cold light filtering through the thin curtains, casting long shadows across the small room. He could hear the muffled voices of the household waking up, the rhythm of an ordinary day in an extraordinary situation. Maya found him sitting at the table, a faraway look in his eyes. "You okay?" she asked softly, sitting beside him. He nodded slowly. "I'm thinking about what's next. The fight ahead won't be easy, Maya. They'll do everything to keep us apart, to silence what we're trying to say." She reached for his hand. "We'll face it together. You're not alone anymore." Across town, whispers had already begun. Word of Elijah's presence in the neighborhood had spread, and so had the suspicion and gossip. Martha's accusations and Madame Stella's scheming had stirred the pot. But what no one expected was the ripple effect Elijah's story would create. Elijah's name was becoming a symbol, not of wealth or power, but of resistance. His choice to shed his billionaire identity and live among the people he wanted to uplift was inspiring others to question their own lives, their own prejudices. The tension came to a head when a formal letter arrived at Maya's doorstep. It was sealed with the emblem of a well-known local law firm. Maya's hands trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "We demand that Elijah Harmon immediately cease all contact with your family and vacate the premises. Failure to comply will result in legal action for trespassing and harassment." Maya's eyes welled with tears. They're trying to scare us away. Elijah took the letter, his jaw clenched but his voice steady. They think threats will silence me. They're wrong. That evening, the household gathered to discuss their next move. Maya's mother, a quiet but resolute woman, looked at Elijah with pride. You've brought hope into our lives. Whatever they throw at us, we stand with you. Joy, who had been listening from the corner, finally spoke. They don't see what we see. They don't understand love or courage. Elijah smiled faintly. Then we'll make them understand. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Martha and Madame Stella ramped up their efforts, leveraging every connection and whisper to discredit Elijah and Maya's family. Phone calls in the dead of night, strangers lurking near the house, and subtle acts of intimidation became their daily reality. One night, a heavy knock jolted Maya awake. Through the peephole, she saw two stern-faced men in suits. We're here on behalf of Mr. Harmon's legal team, one said briskly. We have a message for you. They handed her an envelope before disappearing into the night. Inside was a note. Elijah's true identity will be revealed at the right time. Trust the process. The cryptic message left Maya confused but hopeful. Meanwhile, Elijah met quietly with a trusted friend, Marcus, a seasoned attorney with a passion for justice. We need to prepare for the fallout, Marcus said. Once the truth comes out, it will shake everything. Elijah nodded. I'm ready. As the days grew heavier with anticipation, Maya and Elijah continued their work, helping the community, listening to stories, and building alliances. They held small gatherings where neighbors shared their experiences, where laughter and tears mingled freely. One afternoon, as they walked through the local market, an elderly man approached Elijah. Son, I don't know who you are, but you're giving us hope. We see you. Elijah's eyes glistened. That means more than you know. Back at the compound, a late-night conversation unfolded between Maya and Elijah. Do you ever worry they'll never accept us? Maya asked, her voice tinged with vulnerability. Elijah took her hand. I worry every day. But love isn't about acceptance by others. It's about standing true to who we are, no matter the cost. The room fell silent, filled only with the quiet strength of their conviction. Yet, the opposition was far from defeated. One evening, the sound of breaking glass shattered the peace. Martha and a group of men had forced their way into the compound, determined to intimidate. Elijah stepped forward, unarmed but unyielding. This ends now, Martha sneered. You think you can just walk into our lives and take what's not yours? You're the ones who have been stealing lives, Elijah shot back. This family, this community has been your prisoner for too long. A fierce confrontation erupted, but before it escalated further, neighbors and friends poured in, standing as a human shield around Elijah and Maya's family. Faced with the growing solidarity, Martha and her group retreated, their power waning. As the dust settled, Maya turned to Elijah, eyes shining. You're not just a beggar anymore. You're a beacon. Elijah smiled, exhausted but alive. We're just getting started. The chapter closed with the neighborhood buzzing with renewed hope, and Elijah preparing to reveal the truth that would change everything forever. The morning light barely penetrated the heavy curtains when Elijah woke, his mind already racing with what today might bring. The weight of the secret he carried was heavier than any suitcase, and the longer he stayed in this world as a man stripped of wealth and status, the more he felt the sharp contrast between the man he was and the man he pretended to be. He sat quietly at the worn kitchen table in Maya's modest home, the aroma of brewing coffee filling the small space. Maya moved around the kitchen with a calm efficiency, careful not to disturb the fragile peace that had settled since the violent confrontation days ago. The neighborhood was still tense, eyes watching every move, whispers carried on the wind like shadows lurking just beyond sight. "Are you hungry?" Maya asked softly, sliding a steaming cup toward Elijah. He smiled faintly, grateful for her presence. Always. Their mornings had become a ritual, a brief moment of normalcy amidst chaos. But today, a knock at the door shattered the quiet. Maya's hand went instinctively to the pocket where she kept a small folding knife, a token of protection more than a weapon. Opening the door cautiously, she found a young woman standing on the porch. She was dressed neatly, holding a stack of papers in trembling hands. "Miss Maya, I'm from the city," she said, voice hesitant but determined. "I have a message for Mr. Harmon." Elijah exchanged a glance with Maya before rising. "That would be me," he said quietly. The woman handed him the documents. "These are from the board of Ardan Cove Capital. There's a meeting scheduled tomorrow. They want to discuss some urgent matters related to your holdings." Elijah's eyes flickered with something Maya hadn't seen before, a mixture of apprehension and resolve. They finally noticed. Maya reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "We'll face it. Together." As the day unfolded, Elijah's thoughts circled around the coming storm. The world he'd hidden from was ready to confront him, and the stakes had never been higher. That afternoon, in a dimly lit room far from the comforting walls of Maya's house, Elijah met with Marcus, the trusted attorney who had been his anchor throughout this journey. The documents were spread across the table, dense with legal jargon and the cold language of corporate governance. "They want to control the narrative," Marcus said, eyes sharp. "They'll try to paint you as unstable, as a liability. But we have leverage." Elijah leaned forward. "What leverage?" Marcus smiled thinly. "The truth. The way this whole system is built, on exclusion, on control. You've seen it firsthand. Now it's time for the world to see it too." Meanwhile, word of Elijah's identity began to leak, the subtle ripple turning into waves. The neighborhood buzzed with speculation, some in awe, others in disbelief. The stark contrast between the beggar they'd come to know and the billionaire they'd heard about was almost too much to comprehend. In the shadows, the opposition grew desperate. Martha, fueled by rage and humiliation, plotted with Madame Stella to undermine Elijah's every move. Rumors were spread, old wounds reopened, and the community's fragile trust was tested. One evening, as Elijah and Maya sat beneath the dim glow of a single lamp, their conversation took a somber turn. "Do you think we can really change things?" Maya asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elijah's gaze was steady. "We have to. Not just for us, but for everyone who's been silenced." Suddenly, the phone rang, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Elijah answered cautiously. "This is Preston Mathers," a voice said, cold and measured. "We need to talk." Maya's eyes widened. Preston, the man who had once dismissed Elijah with disdain, was reaching out. The unexpected call was both a threat and an opportunity. Elijah hung up and looked at Maya. The real battle begins now. In the following days, Elijah's life became a whirlwind of clandestine meetings, strategic alliances, and legal maneuvers. The public face of his empire was still shrouded in mystery, but behind closed doors, the truth was a weapon sharpened with precision. As Preston's attempts to discredit Elijah intensified, a surprising ally emerged. Alina, a young whistleblower within Arden Cove Capital, disillusioned by the corruption she'd witnessed. She provided Elijah with vital information, exposing the deep-rooted systems designed to keep people like him out. Together, they crafted a plan not just to reclaim Elijah's rightful place, but to dismantle the barriers that had kept so many trapped. One night, as the city lights flickered outside their small window, Maya and Elijah shared a quiet moment of hope. "We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore," Maya said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Elijah nodded. "We're fighting for everyone who's ever been ignored, judged, or cast aside." Their hands intertwined, a silent vow passing between them. The dawn would bring new challenges, but for the first time in a long time, Elijah felt something he hadn't known he'd missed. Purpose. The tension in the air was thick as Elijah prepared to step into the lion's den. The conference room at Ardan Cove Capital's headquarters was nothing like the humble spaces he'd grown accustomed to in recent weeks. Polished mahogany tables, sleek leather chairs, and walls lined with abstract art all screamed power and exclusivity. Yet here he was, a man who had once been invisible, now commanding the attention of the very people who tried to erase him. As he entered, eyes turned, some curious, some cold, others openly hostile. Preston Mathers was there, sitting at the head of the table, his usual smug grin replaced by a tighter, more guarded expression. Around him sat key executives, board members, and legal advisors, all poised to confront the man they had underestimated. Elijah's heart steadied. He wasn't here to beg for approval or explain himself. He was here to reclaim what was his and to expose the rot beneath the surface. Preston was the first to speak, his voice icy. "Mr. Harmon, or should I say the man who masqueraded as a beggar, this charade has caused quite a stir. Care to explain?" Elijah's gaze was calm but piercing. "I did not masquerade. I sought truth. I wanted to see how the world treated a man stripped of his wealth and title. What I found was a system built on assumptions, on exclusion." Murmurs rippled through the room. Preston's eyes narrowed. "And what do you propose?" "That we rewrite the rules because of one experiment?" Elijah took a slow breath. "Not rewrite. Transform. There's been injustice here, systemic and deliberate. I walked these streets. I saw the faces of those ignored, judged by their clothes, their stations. I witnessed how fear and prejudice operate under the guise of protocol." A sharp intake of breath came from one board member, a woman with silver-streaked hair, who had kept silent until now. "Mr. Harmon, your claims are serious. Are you prepared to back them with evidence?" Elijah nodded. "Yes. Alina, from your compliance team, has been instrumental in gathering data, proof of policies selectively enforced, of voices silenced." At that moment, Alina entered the room, her presence alone shifting the energy. She laid a thick folder on the table, filled with documents, emails, recorded conversations, and internal memos that painted a damning picture. Preston's face paled slightly. "This is troubling," he muttered, attempting to maintain control. "But these are just allegations." "Allegations backed by facts," Elijah countered. "And I am here not just for myself, but for everyone who's been dismissed, marginalized. It's time for accountability." Suddenly, the doors burst open, and in strode Marcus, the security chief, his expression torn between loyalty and shame. "I witnessed much of what's in those files," he said quietly. "And I regret my part in it." The room fell silent, tension tightening like a noose around Preston and a few others. Their carefully maintained facades began to crack. Preston tried to interject, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "This is a witch hunt. You're destroying reputations based on vendettas." Elijah held up a hand. "No vendettas." "Justice. The question is, are you willing to face it, or continue hiding behind lies?" The CEO, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, his tone measured but firm. "We must act. This isn't just about a single incident, but a culture that risks our integrity and survival." Preston's mask slipped entirely. You think you can come in here, play the hero, and change everything overnight? This is business, not a charity. Elijah's voice rose, steady and resolute. Business without humanity is hollow. You're about to learn that true power lies in equity, transparency, and respect. The CEO nodded to the legal counsel, who began outlining immediate steps: suspensions, independent investigations, policy reforms, and public apologies. The board members murmured in reluctant agreement. Outside, Maya waited anxiously. When Elijah finally emerged, his face was weary, but victorious. You did it, she said softly. He smiled tiredly. It's just the beginning. Weeks later, Elijah sat at a community center, no longer the beggar, not yet the billionaire, but a man committed to change. Preston's fall was swift and public, suspended, stripped of titles, and facing legal scrutiny. Madame Stella and Martha's schemes unraveled, their names blackened by scandal. Yet Elijah knew the fight was far from over. The system was deep-rooted, resistant to change. But with allies like Alina and Maya, and the voices of those long silenced, he was ready. Maya looked at him, hope shining in her eyes. What now? Elijah looked around at the faces eager for justice, for opportunity. Now we rebuild, from the ground up. Their hands clasped, a promise unspoken but understood. In the quiet strength of that moment lay the dawn of a new era. The chapter closed, but the story of resilience, justice, and transformation was only just beginning. The sun was dipping low beyond the city skyline, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood where Elijah had chosen to plant the seeds of change. The community center buzzed softly with activity, not the grand boardrooms or marble halls of corporate power, but a place alive with hope and real human connection. Elijah stood near the entrance, watching as people gathered, young entrepreneurs, displaced workers, activists, and everyday folks who'd once been overlooked by the system. They came with questions, with stories, with hunger for something better. And Elijah was here to listen, to lead, but most of all, to learn. His phone buzzed with messages, news updates about Preston Mathers, who was now under investigation, suspended from his high-ranking positions, and facing legal actions for his part in the systemic discrimination. The fall of Madame Stella and her daughter Martha had sent ripples through the social circles that once shielded them. Their reputations were shredded in the court of public opinion, and quietly, justice was weaving its threads. But what struck Elijah most was not the downfall of those who had wronged him. It was the faces in the room before him, the people who had lived lives filled with quiet pain, whose voices had been silenced for too long. He remembered the days when he was just a man in tattered clothes, unseen and unheard, the way people had walked past him as if he were air. And now, standing here, he was part of a movement to rewrite those stories. Mr. Harmon? A voice called out. Maya approached, holding a thick binder filled with notes and community petitions. The response has been incredible. People are ready to stand up, ready to demand real change. Elijah smiled, a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there when he'd been cloaked in anonymity. This is bigger than me, Maya. It's bigger than any of us. It's about dismantling the walls that divide us brick by brick. A young woman stepped forward, her voice steady but impassioned. What about the banks? What about the corporations that keep people like us out? How do we hold them accountable? Elijah nodded. We use every tool at our disposal: transparency, public pressure, legal action. But it starts with visibility. We expose the systems that thrive on exclusion. The room erupted in thoughtful chatter, the kind that sparks real action. It was here, among these people, that Elijah found a sense of purpose deeper than wealth or power. Later that evening, Alone for a moment, Elijah reflected on his journey. From the beggar in the rain to the man who had emptied $2 billion to shake a crooked system. He knew the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges. There would be backlash, resistance, maybe even threats. But for the first time, he wasn't alone. Suddenly, his phone rang. The name on the screen was unfamiliar. He answered cautiously. "Mr. Harmon, this is Attorney Daniels from the Department of Justice. We've reviewed your case and the evidence provided. There will be a formal investigation into the discriminatory practices at Mecklin Financial and its affiliates." "Your cooperation has been invaluable." Elijah allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Thank you. Justice isn't just a word anymore. It's becoming a reality." He hung up and looked out at the city lights flickering to life. A whisper of wind carried the promise of change. Before walking away, he took one last glance at his phone. A message from Joy appeared. "We're so proud of you. Keep going. We're with you every step." Elijah's heart swelled with gratitude. Love and justice, two forces that had collided in the most unexpected way, had become the foundation of his new life. As he stepped into the night, he thought of the people watching this story unfold, wondering if justice could truly prevail in a world often stacked against them. Elijah wanted them to know. It could. But it required courage, persistence, and the refusal to be invisible. To those who have followed this journey, thank you. Your voices matter. Your stories matter. Together, we can shine light into the darkest corners and build a future where no one is judged by the color of their skin or the size of their bank account. If this story touched you, if it made you think, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep the conversation alive, because change begins with us. One story, one voice, one act of courage at a time. The end, but also the beginning.